Nothing quite like having strong opinions about a book I dislike to bring me out of hiatus. Hello everyone and welcome to whatever this video is going to become. My name is Zarina and today we're going to be talking about the book that wasted my time, One Dark Window. I know, fighting stance for a lot of people. I am aware that this is a popular book. I will get to that in a hot second. I'm going to do a general warning preface right now. Basically, if you really like this book and you are not open to hearing any kind of opinion that goes against your own, I would click out of this video. This is mainly going to just be a unstructured rant video with little to no backing of my argument other than my strong feelings that I still have about this book, even though I finished it multiple days ago. So yeah, if you're not down for that today, that is okay. Just click away before I rage bait you. That's not my goal. I have very, very strong opinions that don't happen to go with the masses on this book, and I'm just doing that as a warning. On top of that, there is no hate towards the author or people who enjoy this book. I understand that we all can have different tastes. It's just that I have some severe problems with this book that I cannot overlook, and I just understand that's not how it is for everyone. So, because of that, that is the general preface. Please do not be upset. These are my opinions. Everything said in here is an opinion that can be taken one way or the other. I'm breaking my squishy as we're speaking. So, One Dark Window, this book severely wasted my time, unfortunately. This book has been popular for a very long time. It is published by Orbit Books, which is a imprint, I believe, of Little Brown Books? ? I looked it up and then proceeded to forget. The author is Rachel Gillig, and it's generally a pretty popular book. It's been pretty popular on Book Talk for a very long time, and I do fear that for me personally, this is one of those overhyped TikTok books that might have done better in my brain if it had been overhyped, but that's not just the only issue I'm having with it. Oh man, I'm really ripping my squishy. I did know I was going to dislike this book around chapter 3. I do have a pretty good sense of whether I'm going to enjoy a book early on. There's always an option where I'm going to enjoy something later. For example, ACOTAR, I did like the second book and did enjoy the rest of the series after just book 1 was terrible. However, now I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that author has done, so I now read those books with a much different window of thought and don't enjoy them as much. But that kind of thing where I trust the internet when they say things get better, just hold on. Should things get better? Should they just be good from the get-go? Yes. But now, with the world of publishing as it stands, and with how people read, and with how large the reading community has gotten, I just know sometimes the promise is true. We're gonna hold on and it's gonna be good. Unfortunately, this was not it. I was around chapter 3 when I realized I'm not gonna like this book. This is such a popular book. Maybe there's something that changes that makes the book better. So I went online, which I never look at reviews before I read books. I like to go in as blind as humanly possible, and it does have a very high rating. So I was like, okay, maybe it's something I'm missing. Time out! This is not gonna be spoiler free. I did forget to mention that. So yeah, I haven't said anything spoilery from now, but I think just as a general warning, if you have not read the book and you want to read the book, I would say I'm really sorry. There's no way I can put these thoughts into making sense. That sentence. With not spoiling. I'm gonna do my best, but yeah, there's just no way. But yeah, people are like, oh, there's a twist in the second half that makes the second half so much better. It picks up. A lot of people like the second book better. Some people like the first book better, blah, 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 blah. I was like, okay, there's probably something that's going to happen. So I kept reading. And then around halfway, I was like, oh man, this really, really sucks. I think I want to give up. But I don't know because it's such a popular book. So that's when I went on TikTok and I went on Instagram and I typed some stuff. And I was like, hey, folks, should I keep reading? I only had a couple of people who were like, yes, absolutely. And some people were like, keep going, I guess. And I was like, okay. And I only had 2 people that I no, DNF immediately. Shout out to Cynthia. She was one of those. I should have DNF'd. I should have went with my gut. But I could not make this video without finishing the book, which is what I was telling myself the whole time I was reading it. The internet was like, no, keep going. It just gets better. There's something that happens that it makes it amazing. And I was like, oh, okay. Especially because a couple people who told me, they were like, they are the people who we have very similar reading tastes to. So I was like, oh man, okay, gotta keep going. I shouldn't have done that. I already am forgetting this book because I hated it so much, and I don't really like to be angry about things, so I try to push them out of my brain as soon as possible. And yeah, which this video, I was going to film this the day I finished it, but I was really angry, and I was like, I'm gonna say things that I don't 100% necessarily mean without good context, and I really don't want that on the internet. But today I did realize, I want to get rid of this book, and I have a couple tabs in it, so to take those out and give it to the library used bookstore, I need to like film this video, and I really want this book out of my house because I really don't like it. So one of the biggest issues I have against this book is the marketing. So we're gonna start with there. It is a severely overhyped book, I think, which did not help its like anything in this case. Like, too many people were talking about it, and I thought it was a good idea, and unfortunately it wasn't. But one of the biggest things that people talk about this book is how unique the magic system is. And to some regards, I think that perspective does have a little bit of hold, but I don't think it's quite what people are thinking. One of the way the magic system works in this book is there's this like spirit of the woods who used to be like the deity that people prayed to, but the Shepherd King made a deal with her, and she would give him these cards that had like magic powers. And the first thing he gave him 12 of this one card, and the next thing he gave up gave him 11 of this card. And the reason why these cards were so important is because in the world, magic comes with like a degeneration. So like any magic spell you would cast would cause like the magic power to run out, basically. Like, it only worked for a short period of time, except these cards have permanent magic power. The only thing that had permanent magic power in this world is the deity of the spirit of the woods, basically. The 12 are the least powerful, and then he kept going until like number 1, the Twin Elders card, is the most powerful of them. This magic system, though in Western media, is very unique, especially with the book space of this genre of romantasy. It is unique. However, I realize that it is only unique to those who do not regularly consume media from other parts of the world. So, for example, I'm going to use one of my favorite shows ever in history, and it's actually one of the first animes I ever watched. It's based off a manga, and then that's from Fairy Tail. So in Fairy Tail, there is many different kinds of magic, but the one I'm specifically referring to is those of the Celestial Wizards. Basically, the Celestial Wizards are people who don't actually have too much magic power of their own, so they can't really use any of like the elemental magic or some of the other really cool magic in the world, but they rely on these keys that represent different constellations. And for the like lesser level constellations, which are the silver keys, there's more of them, and people have better access to them, and they take less magic power to use, versus the gold keys, which there's only one for each member of the zodiac, and those take a lot more magic power to summon and like hold the spirit in the like human world. And like Lucy, which is one of the main characters of Fairy Tail, she uses celestial magic. The system is kind of the same in Fairy Tail, except the degeneration isn't permanent. Like, you can only summon a certain amount of spirits, and it takes toll on your like magic, but they like, because of the world of Fairy Tail, they regenerate as like the longer they take between summoning spirits. Versus like in One Dark Window, a user of the card can use the magic of the card, but it degenerates them permanently. So it's very, very similar. So that's why when people are like, oh, this is a very unique magic system, I was like, actually, it is not. Another really great example, I think, even more on the cards, is Cardcaptor Sakura. I haven't watched that show in a long time, but I just remember reading about the cards and I was like, oh man, it's the same thing. So I do think that the magic system is unique in the sense of adult romantasy in the United States, but in the larger... oh man, I made a hole in my squishy. Okay, this poor squishy is done after today. In the larger scope of stories, I actually think that this magic system not only is not unique, but is kind of boring comparing to some of those other ones. And that's one of the reasons I really just didn't enjoy it. I just feel like the magic system, it was too thin, I guess. Like, you can tell that the characters in the world don't really understand fully. They just kind of accept reality of like, magic works this way, and like, we're gonna just go with it. However, like, there's no real explanation to why people don't question things and don't go, like, they just go along with it. And I know some of it's like the brainwashing of their society and how big the Book of Elders and the story of the Shepherd King is, with especially like the king and the degeneration and like the physicians. This is definitely not going to make sense if you've not read the book. So sorry. I don't know, it just was kind of boring, and I think that's the part that was really annoying. Is just like, I was looking for something like fresh and unique and not like something I've read before in the romantasy space, which I guess maybe was a me problem. And unfortunately, that's just what it was. And even the romance isn't that strong. And I feel like almost to the detriment of the book, because there's really nothing going on. Hi, so sorry, I'm doing this laying down because I was editing and I was laying down. But I also realized I never talk about Raven and the reason why I felt like the romance wasn't very strong. I don't actually mind the fact when romances aren't the main focal point of fantasy books. Those are actually my favorite. However, because there's so little going on in this book, it kind of just needed that to have something going on. And I feel like one of the biggest problems with that was the fact that Raven was just not very built out as a character. Like, I really do feel, I remember thinking multiple times that he was kind of just a projection of like readers' wants in a fantasy based like series, basically. Like, he is kind of like fill in the blank with whatever you want characteristically, because yeah, I just felt like he was such like a wall. I didn't understand his character at all, and I did not honestly feel any sort of attraction towards this character, if that makes sense. Like, I don't fully understand why Elsbeth relied on him, especially with how short the time period. I believe the whole book happens over like a series of maybe like a week or two, so it just makes it even more unbelievable. But you're also talking the person who literally hated Romeo and Juliet because it only happened in like 3 days, and that's kind of what I was getting with this book. Like, that was actually the connection my brain put together was, man, this feels like Romeo and Juliet, like even worsely written than having to read it as a Shakespeare play. This probably does not make sense, but yeah, that's my opinion on that. Okay, back to regular me. The amount of times I read magic comes with a price in that book, like someone saying it, someone thinking it, someone just mentioning it, it was like actually painful. It, I think, was said more times than the entire ACOTAR series of someone saying like calls to like. And if you've read that series, you definitely know how often that's brought up, which is another reason why I was like, oh man, this really freaking sucks. Because like, I understand if someone said it once, maybe in like an intro, but like, we get it. Like, please shut up. Like, we understand that's how magic works in this world. That's the whole issue that we're dealing with this girl. And like, I was so done and so pissed off the entire time. Any single time that phrase came up, I like had the urge to either, I had to just close it, and what I wanted to do was throw it across the room. What I did instead, because I'm a mature adult in public apparently, is close the book and just stare at a wall, because I was like, if I talk to someone right now, it is not going to be good. I think I'm going to talk about the language of this book, which is really funny, because actually one of the people who responded was like texting me, and they were like, hey, like, this was one of my favorite books of the year, and one of the reasons I really, like, even though the language is really dense, like, it was a really good time, and you just have to get past it. However, I severely disagree with this statement. Like, their opinion that the language was dense is their opinion. However, I think what drove me nuts is that how inconsistent the writing is and how lost the voice of the writer sometimes gets. It is a little bit on the world building, but much more on, I don't know, this one just feels like it's on the editor. There's so much about this book that is like on the editor to either catch and maybe suggest something different, but it just feels like the editor wasn't pushing the author as hard as they possibly could, because there's just so many of these issues that probably would have been fixed with a little bit more time and with a little more criticism on the editor's part. So the language in this book really flexes between like high fantasy language and then just normal slang, and it drove me nuts because it doesn't seem very consistent. The way like the characters cussed was very modern. They did use like words specific to the story, like instead of like oh god, they said like oh trees because spirit of the woods. But that compared to sometimes the way they talked was like ye old, and it was just so inconsistent. And I felt like what didn't help was that the character was also thinking very inconsistently. Sometimes when she was thinking about certain things, she used like more old-timey language, versus sometimes when she was thinking it was just modern language, and it drove me crazy. That's definitely a me thing. I definitely pick up on stuff like that, and it drives me crazy. Which, how many times can I say crazy? You know what? Maybe I say crazy in this video. The amount of times that they say magic comes with a price. Also, if you've seen Once Upon a Time, like the TV show, that's definitely the vibe. Sorry, my dad called me. I got distracted. Anyway, now we're gonna talk about the world building. Some of the issues I had with this world building. I'm falling off the bed. Hold on. Ugh. Sorry, I'm also sitting on the bed. I went to physical therapy yesterday, and we did a lot of core stuff. And the idea, and I have issues with my like sitting core muscles, so sitting in a chair sounds awful. Yeah, some of the major issues I had with the world building is like, I understand to some degree that the world is very isolated, and we only are really getting. I fixed my hair too. I did notice that. I understand that because of the mist that surrounds the kingdom that we're currently in, that some details are going to be more foggy, especially like other kingdoms and how maybe prior relationships of other kingdoms are, because they've been cut off for so long. But the world didn't feel very lived in. Like, it didn't feel like a lot of it didn't feel like it existed. It was kind of just like, here is a like regular castle town with a regular castle monarchy, and the only thing slightly different is our magic system, but like the story is just the same. And unfortunately, it just kind of was so boring that I was having a hard time finishing it. And I think one of the reasons is just, it doesn't make a lot of sense, because Elsbeth is a like castle royal, not a royal, she is in a high-ranking family. So for her to know so little about the actual workings, and she kind of just says like, this is a destroyer, this is this, but she doesn't quite like this. Also, I just decided that she's dumb because she doesn't quite have a grasp of society around her to understand a lot of stuff, which is why I think it was a detriment to the story too, because it just felt like so much of the book, like her infection, she talked about how dangerous it is, but we don't really ever feel the repercussions of what it's like to have an infection. And I think the only time you really get a serious like heart-moving scene about it, heart-moving is the wrong word, what am I trying to say, it's a scene where they catch the boy, and they have to, her and her like new team of friends have to save him. Until then, which is literally like 3/4 of the way into the book, right? Yeah. You don't really fully understand how Elspeth having the infection is actually going to affect her, because she's been so protected her entire life, and though she is kind of aware of it, we don't really feel it. Like, even though in the first scene she's escaping, she's protected by the monster, and like there's just so many things protecting her that it feels like none of her actions actually have real consequences, and it just was really annoying. This might sound like a dig at the author, I promise it's not, but there are just some people, when they are writing books, you can kind of just tell that in their regular life they're not someone who regularly has to pay attention to their social standing within a group of people. And I feel like this makes sense to people who've had to do that. Like, if you just have to know constantly around you how you stand amongst other people to kind of like regularly survive, there's a certain like checklist of things you do to understand where you stand. This also kind of goes for like other societies that use like honorifics, for example. So like in Korean, you have to kind of know where above you in society, in a way, people are like around you. Like, you have to kind of generally understand someone's age to use the correct honorifics, but also you don't want to use too formal of honorifics because it might like off-put some people, but you also can't be too casual. So stuff like that, where like you constantly have to be aware of how you stand in society and like what you're doing. And with the characterization of Elspeth and her issue with having to hide her infection, it feels like she should have been doing that, and just so much of the book is her not doing that. It kind of just felt like, what do you mean you're supposed to be hiding your infection, but like you meet Raven Yu and you like immediately talk back to him? I'm so sorry, that just is the most stupid thing to do. Why would you do that? And I just had so many of those moments throughout the book where it just like, her character, even with the protection that she has from being the daughter of the old captain of the Destroyers, just did not make sense. And I do feel like I did end up watching at some point a couple people reviewing the book just to see, like, because there was one person, their video was a little bit clickbaity, where they were like, oh, I hated this book, and I went into it and they're like, yeah, I hated the first half but I love the second half. You just have to overlook all these plot holes. And unfortunately, I think I'm just one of those people who can't. I think severely cannot overlook things. It drives me nuts. But I love attention to detail, and attention to detail is really just what makes things just like so, yeah. Chef's kiss, that was what I was looking for. And I just feel like because of that and her lack of attention to detail did not make any parts of the story believable to me, which is why I had such a difficult time with it. It just felt like everything worked out a little too conveniently. Like, oh, of course this person has to have the perfectly correct card. Like, why couldn't they run into at least one person where they thought had the correct card and didn't? Like, I'm so sorry. So much of the book was like, oh, you want the well card? Well, guess who has it? This person who just happens to be coming in our direction right now that we can go, like, overthrow. And, like, sure, some things went wrong, but they still ultimately, like, got out basically unscathed. And though some people were a little suspicious, they weren't, like, actually doing anything about it. Like, that's... yeah, it just made me really, really angry. Another thing that was really, really stupid to me was the fact that Elspeth does not realize that the nightmare taking over is her degeneration. Like, I'm so sorry. You want me to believe that she had no idea, which how dumb she is. I can kind of believe it, but like as a reader, you expect me to find out that in this world where every magic has a sort of degeneration, and she touches a card and she has this power to have the nightmare help her, and every time they mention it in literally the first 1/4 of the book, he's getting stronger and she can't really ignore the voice. You expect me to not figure out that is her degeneration. Alright, so editing me back again because I segue really terribly into this next part. But basically, something else that really, really bothered me was the big twist. And it wasn't like the information of the big twist, but it wasn't really a twist because, so in the lore of the story, the Nightmare card is the soul of the Shepherd King. That's what he traded to make the cards. Sorry, Herman just jumped on me and I'm sore. Oh my gosh. Okay, so the Nightmare cards are the soul of the Shepherd King. And the nightmare is in her head. So therefore, the Shepherd King is the nightmare that is in her head, which is, again, 1 + 1 = 2, because that's what they say. So you're expecting the big twist to be that the Shepherd King is the nightmare, when literally you told us, oh, he's here, say hello to the boy. You've told us multiple times that, like, that's what it is. And then just because you actually physically state it out loud does not make it any more special than us literally figuring it out in chapter 4 when you said it like 12 times. Yeah, so the reason why I needed to build a bridge here is because I really randomly just start talking about the little poems at the top, and because that is where the most of the repeat information comes from. So I will let myself go do that now. Okay, bye. So another thing that really, really pissed me off was how much they mention the lore of the Elder cards. I feel like because the characters are talking about them, you can understand, like, oh, they're trying to introduce them. But the freaking poems at the beginning of the chapters were not only so stupid, they also just repeated information that we already knew. Like, I'm so sorry. They were literally so useless. Though I don't love Fourth Wing, but one thing it does very, very well is those, like, sentence to 2-sentence quotes at the beginning that do give information that's pertinent to the chapter that is not mentioned in any other form, or it's, like, there to back things up, or to be kind of like a quick, like, oh, this is so cool. Versus in this book, they were just completely useless. Like, fully just repeating information we already knew. Or, at first, they were nice because they would introduce new information, but then you'd find out that information is not pertinent until chapter 7, and then they mention it like 12 times in chapter 7, and you're like, oh my gosh, stop it. Stop repeating. This is so useless. This is such a waste of my time. Stop it. Like, actually, so... yeah, I think... also, the formatting of it, maybe just in my specific volume, was just so clunky. I actually tabbed one of them because it was the only one I liked. And that's on chapter 32. And it's the one that's the nightmare. Beware the dark, beware the fright, beware the voice that comes in the night. It twists and it calls through shadowy halls, beware the voice that comes in the night. It is the only one that has the correct rhyme scheme through the whole thing. And you can argue with me and be... all the other ones are so lame. And this dark square with, like, text is so clunky, and I feel like this is the only one that's also formatted right, because so many of them have, like, partial sentences going off, or, like, are so full. There's even a chapter where there's, like, 2 cards, because what they wanted to say at the beginning was just too much information. And I'm sorry, why could you also not make sure that the text was evenly spread? yeah, and again, they're just useless. Like, there are just, like, useless information on top of useless information. They honestly feel like when you play a video game and the loading screen and they're just giving you the sentences, like, oh man, the first one that's coming to my head is Genshin Impact, but it's kind of like, elemental slimes are, like, resistant to the element they represent. Like, no freaking duh. Like, literally, you can play the game for 2 seconds and know that, and that's what these cards are basically serving. Yeah, and then on top of that, they were just annoying me. This also could be that I am not really the biggest fan of poetry as, like, the chapter starter. I also hated the haikus in the beginning of Trials of Apollo. I thought they were also really dumb, and they also were a waste of my time. Yeah, and then on top of that, the dialogue, I think I also just not like. Oh, so for my example of how stupid Elspeth is, here is a quote from page 363. I don't know what chapter this is, but they're basically talking about Prince Hoth. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And I'm just going to read it. And I'm going to say Elspeth said, because some of them are like, you know what I mean. Okay. Prince Hoth, not me, I said, my voice cold. I merely happened to be there. My father's blue eyes traced my room. I'd be wary of Prince Hoth, Elspeth. He's a very horrid man, Elspeth said. The corner of his lip twitched. He's his father's son. I didn't ask what he meant. I doubted he would tell me, even if I did. What do you mean? What do you mean you do not understand? What do you mean you don't understand that he's his father's son when the whole book you've been complaining about how horrible the king is? Yeah, my tab actually genuinely says 1 + 1 = 2, and then my version of the crying face emoji when I write it out. Because what do you freaking mean? I almost cussed. I didn't mean to. What do you mean you don't understand what that says? This is just giving, like, someone... This is giving when someone just uses AI all the time and then they're suddenly asked to, like, extrapolate out of something and they can't use the AI overview. Like, I'm so sorry. Like, what do you mean you don't know what he means? The hole in my squishy is just... So, I don't just create problems. I like to try to find solutions to problems I probably created. But anyway, solutions. Here are some things that I would personally change or would have mentioned to the author if I were the editor of this book, because though I do not like how the book is, I do feel like there's genuinely some very interesting bones going on that just were, I don't know, it just kind of feels like someone reanimated a skeleton in the wrong direction, if that makes sense. So here are some things that I'd fix. First of all, you'd have to deal a lot more with the world. I feel like, especially when people were considering this a standalone before they knew there was going to be a second one, it just feels like with the world as it is, it just feels like there's a lot of details missing. I would have really wanted this author to go back to the drawing board and kind of get a bit more about the daily life that's happening for not only Elspeth and people of that tier, but for royalty and for the civilians. And even if that information did not make it in the book, I think it's really important as a writer to understand how your world works on a day-to-day. And I just feel like that's severely missing from this book. Like, we understand how certain special events happen, like Equinox, and that's basically it, because not much happens in this book. Oh, and Market Day. It just is missing a lot of information. Well, and I think the author tries, it's just not very good. For example, this quote that Jesper says during Market Day actually drove me crazy, because, like, this is so useless. Like, this is such a waste of time to write. But basically, the quote goes, next to me, Jesper paid 5 coppers for a new pair of sheepskin gloves. I love Market Day, she said. It gives people a chance to step out of their routines, to have a little fun. Life isn't always about sword fighting and card stealing, you know. Yes, we're aware. Especially because that's all this book is about, and not by, like, it actually being necessary, just because you can tell that this author just wasn't fully sure what their world looked like, and just really wanted to comment the fact that Market Day is the only real routine getter-outer that people have. That was a big yikes for me. Yeah, so that is definitely one of the things same thing with the magic system. I think a lot of, though the degeneration in general is cool, the rules of how people degenerate are different. I feel like I would have challenged the author a lot more to expand how the spirit of the woods magic worked, and have that more, a little bit of like an investigation element that was going on with these characters, is because they're dealing with the Shepherd King and the degeneration, maybe they're looking into the Spirit of the Woods to kind of like find out how magic worked before the cards, and what are they called? I forgot what the cards are called. And that kind of helps lead the investigation, even if it's leading the investigation in the wrong way, of how to help Elsbeth and Emery. This was also just like kind of big on the editor to make sure that the author's writing is consistent in the actual language that is both being spoken and the characters thinking in. It just feels like it's not like chapter like chunks that like the language is different, but it just feels incredibly inconsistent. And this is definitely something that could have been fixed if the editor put in a little bit more work, it feels like. And I know I'm shitting on the editor, I promise I'm not. Like, this is not anything against this specific editor. This is just something I fear like was not thought of. And like, I also understand the feeling of like when you think a project is good. I say think because not everyone always agrees, but when you have this feeling about a project being good, sometimes you and the person you're working on with it can kind of get in a filter bubble of your own and just think, oh my god, this is gonna be so great and this is so wonderful and this is great. And then that's when you start showing it to other people and they're like, oh, what are these? And because you're having such a great time, you assume the person who is the dissenter is like lying to you, or like there's no way that could be true, versus instead taking a step back and going, maybe let's check to see if what they're saying has merit, and then kind of looking at it and then disagreeing or not or agreeing. I just have the feeling that's what happened with this book. I don't know why. This thought process has no basis. This is just me speculating. But like in my gut, that's telling me like what happened. There's just the people working on this were like, this is a great idea, and did not, I don't know, expand their scope when they were thinking more about this project, when I really think they should have. I think also, instead of like shutting away from a lot of the magic systems that use similar things, I feel like the author might have been good for the author kind of to lean in to some of those systems, like in Cardcaptor Sakura or Fairy Tale, or like look in other cultures, like modern fantasy stories, because they're done really well. And you can, even if she planned on changing nothing, just having a better understanding of how other worlds function in correlation to the one she's building might have been really helpful. Oh man, and then I did forget to talk about one thing, and that is how heavy-handed the foreshadowing is, which is really funny because I'm a substitute teacher. The classroom I was in, they were actually doing a quiz on foreshadowing, and we're going to talk about the direct foreshadowing in this book, which was so heavy-handed, it actually made the book very boring to read. And that is probably why I didn't enjoy the twist, because it wasn't actually a twist. It was something I guessed quite literally in chapter 3 or 4, just because of how much over-explaining of the magic system there was, and the lack of variation, because this book does a lot of 1 + 1 = 2, versus maybe having like a 1x where x can equal something else, like, you know, addition versus a multiplication function. Who said you wouldn't use math in the future? That didn't make sense. But a lot of this book is just kind of like the natural progression of things and like, because there's not a lot, it's not very built out this way, and it's very like this. When you're trying to be interesting, like, all you can really do is explain ahead and then go back and then explain ahead, versus being able to move out like this and then give the reader more branching options to what this possible twist could be, versus this one kind of just suffered from the fact that it's like, there's only one possible twist. There's literally only one thing that would make sense with the world that they built in this scenario, and it just happens to be that. So therefore, it is not a twist, it is not a turn, it is in fact just the natural progression, which is what made me angry. I really think that's it. I feel like I'm so glad I did wait, because when I was angrier, I feel like I would have explained this in a more what am I trying to say? A more terrible manner than I did right now. Yeah. Hopefully anything I said made sense, because I completely forgot what I started this video talking about and how I ended up here. So anyway, we made it to the end of the video. If you've watched this long, thank you so much for watching. I'd appreciate it a lot if you subscribed or liked or left a comment. Like, I guess I'd also love to hear what people really liked about this book, because I feel like a lot of the reviews I've been seeing are just people saying the same like 3 or 4 things. And I'd just be really interested if there's a person who likes something that has not been mentioned. Yeah. Ooh, I also like to end things positively on things I liked, but unfortunately I don't think there's very many things about this I liked. So I will instead end about the fact that I am currently rereading Keeper of the Lost Cities Book 8, and I'm having a great time. I was giggling and kicking my feet because my favorite ship is getting closer to becoming real. Yeah. On top of that, I'm also watching Fairy Tale because I found out that for the 20th anniversary, the main storyline is getting more and more stuff, and I still haven't finished the last season, so I should probably get on that. Anyway, that really is it for now. So, see you next time. Okay, bye!